Cool. The team.
The dream team.
The dream team.
Speaking of the dream team, let's get this party started. That was not a good segue. I tried, but
I thought you were going to talk about our new package. I was like, go for it, Charlie. Gosh.
What? Oh, we're not ready to discuss that yet.
It's another Friday. This week I did it my way. I made lots of juice and now I feel a boost. Baby say, oh, it's the way I make my juice. Pressing fruits and roots. This week I did it my way. Baby say, oh, now let's have some fun. There is nothing greater than Fridays at Goodnature.
Ow, ow, ow! What's up, my juice lovers? Welcome to Good Nature Radio. Bow, 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 bow. This is your host, Charlie Whitloff, joined by the top two juice business consultants in the world, Chef Ari Sexton and Olivia Esquivel. They're also our superstar instructors on the Good Nature School of Juice. Use code GNRadio for $100 off any course. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That's right.
Rowdy crowd today.
Goodnature Radio is the weekly Friday podcast where the juicing industry comes together to get help with starting and growing a cold pressed juice business, smoothie business, juice bar, juice delivery company, you name it. We can help with all of it. To request consulting or leave us a message, head over to goodnature.com/radio. Join in on the discussion of the Good Nature Juicing Facebook group. Just go on Facebook and search for Good Nature Juicing. Up to over 4,500 members now in that group, talking about all kinds of juice business related stuff all day long. Shop in bulk on the Goodnature Marketplace if you want bottles or frozen acai or what other good stuff is on there? Almond butter,
spirulina,
matcha powder, tea, all that kind of good stuff. Check out the Goodnature Marketplace at goodnature.com. All right, we've got a great episode today. We're going to go all into basically setting par levels. In other words, how much of stuff you should have in stock and how much stuff you should produce on a daily basis in your juice bar, and kind of how to figure out those levels, adjust those levels, and then we'll go into how to actually producing to par levels, like what kind of strategy can you have to make sure you're at the right par levels every day, whether you're juicing every day or a couple times a week. Are you prepping every night? What's the prep list look like? What kind of logs are you taking? All that kind of stuff to make sure you always have the right amount of things in inventory at all times. All right, let's get into it. First of all, if you're a brand new juice bar and you don't know how much stuff you're going to sell, or maybe you're launching a new product, you have no idea how much you're going to sell, how do we think about the first sort of par level, like how much of this juice recipe should you make for the first time, to have on your shelf? Why don't we start with Ari on this, and then Olivia, go to you after.
Yeah, when figuring out how much to produce of every juice, a lot of work goes into it. Basically, a very educated guess. It's never perfect. The biggest thing is making sure you record that information. You have access to how much you're selling. But initially, when you're guessing how much juice to produce of everything, you want to kind of err on the having more side, especially the first week or so, because worst case scenario, you overproduced. It's perfect time to give out samples to people. I would say in terms of like putting in the work of guesstimating how much to make, depends a lot on your demographic. If you're in an area that is new to juicing, I'd go a little bit heavier on the sweeter stuff, a little less on the savory, more vegetable-based juices. But outside of that, I just kind of overproduce slightly. Nothing that would bankrupt me if I was not able to sell it all. Go a little bit heavy, and then be able to offer samples as much as possible to people, get them excited about the product.
Cool.
Yeah,
So
I think it's
you
important
just kind
to
of try to guess and overproduce a little bit. All right, Olivia.
Yeah,
Go for it.
because remember your juice is going to have a shelf life, right? And you want to have that figured out before you produce it. So, if it most of the time it'll go to a 3 or 5 or a 7-day shelf life, depending on what's inside of it. So that should be part of your homework and your research that you're doing before you open the doors. Of course, you'll adjust as you start to, sort of adjust your recipes as you start to make more and more. But just to give somebody a hard number, like if you're opening up a brick and mortar and you can give your juices a 5 to 7 day shelf life, I would produce 20 to 21 bottles per flavor to start with.
Yeah.
Now I work on the X1, so that's a little bit easier for me to say because, I'm able to do bigger volume on that. So that's harder if you're doing, if you're like on an M1 or something like that. But I feel like 20 to 21 bottles around there, give or take, allows me to really measure how many of those did I sell today? I likely am not going to sell out, which I don't want to do. Like a lot of times people will come to me and they're like, I sold out. And I'm like, that's terrible. We don't want to sell out. Because you sold out, that means that, we left money on the table. So I'd rather overproduce. And I know that makes a lot of people scared because they're like, oh my God, I'm going to throw away so much juice. But it's like, hello, we open again tomorrow. And now you have juice in your case. So you don't have to panic to coming into an empty fridge. And then you'll have juice the next day and the next day. And like Ari said, you can sample from that. I always keep one of my juices in the sample fridge. So I always tell everybody, I don't want you to walk away with a $10 or $11 juice that you didn't like. You want to sample it, you tell me. If they ask me to sample a juice and I happen to be out of that at the sample cooler, I pull one from the fridge and I open it and I turn it into the sample. So you'll use, your juices to help you make more sales, and you'll give them out. If it turns out that you were wrong on that one, or that people are just now starting to figure out that you're there, then you adjust as you go. You maybe put them on sale on your last day. But I feel like 20-ish juices per flavor is a good place to start. And maybe you're starting with 6, I don't know, what do you think, Ari? 6 to 8 flavors?
Yeah. I'd say on either end, the stuff that's really sweet or really savory, you can kind of go a little bit less. But also collect data from, you should be doing a soft opening, play days, something like that with friends and family.
Yeah.
Use that as a learning experience of what the demographics are going to gravitate towards. Produce juice for that. See what people are ordering, and then you can kind of gauge which ones are going to be your best sellers. Go a little heavy on that. Stuff that's left over at the end, go a little lighter. And then kind of give your best guesstimate after that.
Right. Like you probably don't need to do 20 of a
because when you invite people to soft open, they're kind of expecting things to be a little rough around the edges. And like they know you're experimenting, trying to figure stuff out. So that's probably a smart idea to do that if you have like a retail store for sure. And how do you so let's say you set your initial par level and you're kind of keeping an eye on everything. How do you track it to make sure you're making the right adjustments?
So you're going to have pars for a lot of other things outside of just juice. Okay, you're going to have pars for your order guide, all your produce items on there. If you have stations in your juice bar, you're most likely going to have pars for your prep work. So first initial step, no matter what, is having your juice recipes by weight. That's extremely important. So that helps out with your order guide. Outside of that, you want to be able to use that same exact spreadsheet, duplicate that with that day's date of when you produced it, so that you can look back and reference how much of everything you produced. On that spreadsheet, also have like a little section where you could throw in manager's notes. You had this event going on. It rained that day. We ran out of this product. And really, the pars, it's the longer you've been in business, the more close and accurate your pars are going to be. After the initial first week, second week, your pars are going to be pretty dialed in with how much juice you need to produce. And that's really when you take it the next step and then start thinking about your juice schedule, your pars for your produce and so on.
Olivia, I think you mentioned something earlier, waste logs.
Yeah. So like I already said, I mean, just obviously keeping track of what's selling. I mean, most people are using Square or Toast or something for their point of sale, and they make sure that you're adding, all of your flavors into your point of sale system. Don't just check out with a 12-ounce juice or a 16-ounce juice, because that's such valuable information to set up your pars on how many of each juice sold, what times they sold. Were they a popular morning? Were they a popular afternoon? But then also, so you'll compare what sold to what goes in the waste log. So if it doesn't end up selling and you end up throwing away 3 big green juices, then in your waste log, you're going to say on 9/12, we threw away 3 big greens because they were out of date. So that's kind of where you figure out, if we're way overproducing, like Chef said, if there was a rainy day, that's always going to throw you off. And then as seasonal things start to change too, like right now I'm watching all of my watermelon and strawberry juices kind of like dip down. So I'm watching that par very closely. And I'm changing the pars based on what's selling and what's not selling. So if I have a watermelon juice and I'm seeing that it's starting to slow down in sales, I'm then watching that par to say, okay, we don't need to be making 48 of these anymore. We could be making 21 of these every 3 days. So, but then I have to go and change, like Chef said, my par on my ordering guide to make sure I'm not ordering, 5 melons anymore. Now I'm only ordering 3 melons. And so that's when you start to kind of figure out, based on what's selling, what you're throwing away, when it's time to start changing your schedule, what's not working. Why is this not selling? Maybe it's positioned in the wrong place. Maybe nobody's talking about it. Maybe nobody's sampling it. There could be a lot of different reasons. It's not always just that it wasn't a popular juice. So that's what I would start to watch. And then that's how you start, like I said, start to change your seasonal features. As soon as those sales start dropping, I get close to taking them off my menu. But then guess what just happened is my watermelon guy just came and said, Olivia, I've got all these watermelons left. I'll give them to you at $6 a watermelon. And right when I was about to cut it off, I'm like, give it to me, baby. $6 watermelon. I can, I can make 21 watermelon juices out of that. That's amazing. So I kept it on a little bit longer. Now I probably won't sell 48 of them, but I'll make more margin on the 21 that I do sell. So I'll keep it a little bit longer because he's got stuck with all these watermelons,
You could even do like an end of summer watermelon juice sale or something.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So go ahead, Jeff.
Olivia, have you had out of your juice menu, is it since you've been in business for a while, is it the same juices consistently every month, or do they ever switch up?
So they're the same juices. I've got, as we started to get more advanced in our production, and as we started to grow our clientele, then our juices started to get more advanced. So I started them out with sort of like baby juices, baby greens. And then as my guests started to get used to that, kind of like into year 1, year 2, then they started asking for more advanced greens with not as much sugar in it, with not as much apple. So then that's when we start plugging in the holes. And I say, I started a juice called I Do Declare, which is all greens, no fruits. Now I don't do 48 of that batch because that takes a certain client that can only take all greens, but there's a market for it. So I do a smaller batch of maybe 17 or 18 of those juices a couple of times a week to keep those people happy. So now pretty much it's the same juices all the time, but I have seasonals that come in and come out. And those pretty much are the same seasonals every year just because they trend so well for me.
It's really weird. Like, I don't know if it's being able to work with a lot of clients in different areas all over. It's a weird trend that I've always noticed is like in really cold climates, where it's the really harsh winters, they love hardcore green juices and cleanses.
Weird.
It's really weird. Like, just my experience from places in like Alaska and North Dakota and up towards Canada and stuff. Those places, it's so surprising that they might not have a juice bar, and then they open and they're like, our hardcore greens are like our best sellers.
Wow.
I don't know if it's kind of the norm or something, but it's kind of a trend I've noticed.
I wonder if it's because they're like eating so many hearty foods that then they want to detox, you know? I don't know. I imagine cold people eat like potatoes and stuff. I don't know. It's a life I'll never know, Ari.
Yeah.
It's like fermented fish and stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, what are they eating up there?
Yeah.
Funny.
Oh man, speaking of potatoes, there's this amazing Korean grocery store here in Austin called H Mart. Ari's familiar with it.
Oh yeah.
Place is awesome. And they have like, you walk into the store, it's this giant store, and you smell the smell of like roasting sweet potatoes. Because they actually like roast sweet potatoes like on hot stones, and you can buy these little paper bags of sweet potatoes.
Oh, man.
And they're delicious. They have nothing on them. You can just eat them just the way they are. I've been snacking on those this past week.
That sounds so good.
Every time I get those from H Mart, it's awesome. There was
you grab in like this little hot thing and pull out this paper bag of potatoes that they roasted on the stones. It's just like so delicious.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
They have this restaurant in Thailand. I guess it originated in Japan. It's like a franchise, and all they sell is this type of sweet potato from Japan. You know, you can either get it hot, just like that from H Mart. You can get it into a smoothie. It's not really a smoothie, but it's just sweet potato and milk, like blended, and that's it. And it was like insane how good it was.
So I know Kwai Chang in Hilo, Hawaii. He makes his juice bar makes acai bowls with a sweet potato base. Do you know how that's done? Is it just pureeing sweet potato?
I don't know personally. There's got to be some really big technique in there, because if you blend a potato, it'll turn gummy. You know, if you go too far. So, Kwai's probably got some.
He's got a trick, yeah.
Some secrets there for sure. You know?
Yeah, that's pretty cool though.
That's
all
awesome.
right. So, yeah, let's go back to topic here. So, and then obviously, as you're prepping for power levels, specifically for juicing, the equipment you have is going to make a difference, right? Like, if you have an M1, it's pretty easy to just whip up a couple of bottles of juice if you're just like off by a couple. If an X1 is like a whole much bigger production, but on the other hand, it's a lot easier to make more juice. So, how do we think about equipment and the role that plays with like juicing daily or juicing every other day or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, if you got the smaller units where you're not doing large batches at a time, I actually recommend going with something like a PAR system. You know, where that's what I call it actually, but it's basically you want to start with a good number for your operation. You know, say it's 10. Okay, you want to do the prep work before you actually open with 10 of each juice, maybe a few less of the hardcore greens or the really sweet stuff, and then set a par of like 3 or 4. And as you're going through the day, you're selling the juice, you hit that, you have 3 or 4 of that one particular juice blend left, then you go ahead and make a few batches and bring it back up to like 10. You know, that's basically the best system you could do for like the smaller production type equipment, you know, but definitely go ahead and prepare like kits, you know, say like the mini holds about, 5 pounds around there, depending on the produce. Go ahead and get those batches ready to go, weighed, washed, ready to go. Don't go crazy with that, but, have like 3 or 4 batches ready to go so that you hit that par, you got to make those batches, just pull it out and run the machine a few times. There are some really big pros for that. Like you'll basically have zero waste, very little to no waste because you're gradually just upping those numbers throughout the day. The challenge is if you sell out of everything or you hit that par for everything at the same exact time, you have a big rush. So that is kind of the downfall of that though.
Well, and I want to make sure people know it's really easy to make a PAR system. you can just do it on a computer or on a scratch piece of paper, but hopefully on a computer, you write down, whether if you're doing your juices, you write down all of your juices, right? You may want to do all your greens first, all your citrus, all your roots, all your sweets, put them in order. Then you establish what your par is. Your par is what you want to have on hand all the time. So let's say your par is, like Ari said, 10, right? So you have 10 bottles. You want to have on hand at all times 10 bottles of your green all the way down. Maybe different juices have different pars. So it should be really easy for you or your staff to take the par list in the morning or during prep or whenever it is when you're creating your production list. And that's what you should be doing your production list based off of, is your pars. So a lot of times people will say, well, like, I'm finding myself juicing the same juice every day. Well, in my opinion, that's bad. You shouldn't be juicing every juice every day. These juices have shelf life. So like Ari helped us in Southern Press Juicery switch to, all right, let's do greens one day. Let's do citrus one day. Let's do roots. Now, do things come up? And sometimes on a roots day, do I need to do greens? Yes, sometimes that comes up. But maybe that day I just do a half batch to get me back on schedule instead of a full batch until my green day hits again. But so you're looking at the par list, and again, this should be used at your smoothie bar. You should have one on your order guide, on everything. I need to have a minimum of 10. I did it today with melons. I needed to have a minimum of 3 melons. I had 1 melon. I ordered 2 melons. So that way it's funny because I had the par guide in my hand and I was asking my juicer, and I realized this is how we over purchase and we spend so much money on foods. Is I will say to him, because I'm lazy and I don't like to go into the walk-in because it's so cold, I'll say, how much, so I knew I had a par of like 1 case of ginger. I'm like, how much ginger do you have? I don't know. Go ahead and order 2 cases. Order 2 cases. Well, you're only supposed to have 1 case on hand, right? So it's really good to stick to a par list because it'll keep you don't want to have too much cash in produce, right? You don't want to waste money on produce. So for me, it keeps me like really, really strict on my inventory to make sure that I'm not over ordering. I mean, for me, it was a difference of we controlled our order guides and our ordering probably 3 or 4 months ago, and it brought an extra $20,000 to my bottom line that we were just sitting on inventory, on stuff like straws and caps and cup sleeve holders and crap that we just had that nobody was, proactive enough to get on the ladder and look up in the storage. So when they look around, they didn't see straws. They would order another 10,000 straws. So we were just sitting on all of the stuff. And so now they have strict orders that before they, put anything on the par list or on the order guide, they have to go and look in every crevice of the store to find it. But it's really the bread and butter of saving money in your store is making sure that you've got particularly an order guide that matches what you're producing.
Yeah. Order guides are so critical.
Ugh.
And the thing that drives me crazy is digital order guides. You should never have a digital order guide. It should always be physical.
Oh, yeah. I had my clipboard out today. You would be proud. Today was my ordering day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I had a clipboard. Awesome. I was freaking out at 8:30 in the morning because I couldn't find my clipboard. So I texted the other manager and I was like, where's the clipboard? Yeah. I had the paper, but I needed my clipboard. Yeah, it's physical. Like you have to write it down. I think it's so important.
Yeah. Too often people just like, oh, I got a case of lemons on hand, and they actually open it and it's all moldy or rotten.
Yes.
So the physical order guide, moving stuff around, moving the produce, make sure it's good. So you have your juice production, your juice pars during your production, and basically, like Olivia mentioned, you want to take your average amount of orders. Say you take your sales from whatever point of sale system you have, and then average it out on how much you're producing a week. Your juices. You already have your weights of your produce. Go ahead and write all those down.
Yep.
And then go ahead and see what that package size is. Right. Like apples are in 40 pounds or 20 pounds, or pineapples are in 20 pounds. And then go ahead and write those pars of, cases of lemons. I need to have 2 on hand at all times. If I have 1.5 cases there, like that second case, order a case. you know, and it's as simple as that. Just going through, figuring out your pars, set up your order guide in an order that works for you. You know, don't just list all your produce items.
Right.
It could be in any order you want. I usually have it where I'll have my office needs on the order guide, you know, paper, pen, stuff like that. And then I'll go into the produce walk-in number 1 if I have multiple walk-ins, or label it that too. You know, this is walk-in number 1. This one is a freezer number 2, and then list those products in the order I usually walk through and take my inventory. You know, make it as simple as possible. And I like making an order guide that is for like 7 days or that week's worth of ordering. That way I could reference what I ordered the last order. Maybe it was short and they're going to add it on for this one. So you always want to think about what works best for your operation.
You can ask your vendors too to put together an order guide for you based on what you've ordered in the past. So like I always say, like, make your reps do the work. Now that's not gonna be your holy grail, but they've got your order history. It's like when you go on Amazon and you click like the buy again. It's basically like that. So they'll put together an order guide specifically for you. And then, you know, you might say, oh, I'm not using cashews anymore. Let's take that off. Or I'm starting to use tahini, add that. But that, to me, that's been really helpful because I had them do that for me for one of my larger purveyors. And it already had like the order guide, you know, the number, the pallet of how many it comes. And it was already set up for me that it just took admin time off of my list of having to create the actual order guide. And then I do it by vendor. So I wish I had one here with me, but you know, it would basically say on the top, like, okay, here's your rep. Here are the days that you order. Here's the time you have to get it in. You can either text it or email it, and gives me all of the instructions. And then it has all the list of the things I normally order, and then the order, you know, the pars and what I need to order, and then how often I need to order. And then like today was my ordering day. So there's some people that come to me like every 2 or 3 days, some vendors. And then there's some that are weird. They just come when I need, right? So like on Tuesdays, I order my weird things like Amazon, or, you know, things that are just like one-offs that don't come from my big suppliers. But having it organized like that, like if you look on my calendar today, my calendar says today you're ordering these 3 companies. Because the worst is when you miss an order cutoff time.
Yeah, it's perfect. Make the order guide work for you, you know?
Yeah.
Block out those days you're not able to order it. And I also do like you mentioned, like the calendar reminders.
Yeah.
You know, use your phone. I do that for sanitation quite often, you know, like I'll set alarms like, oh, time to take my temps for this. You could do that with your orders as well.
You just got log alarms going off all the time. Like, time to check my log on the logs.
No one's calling me, so I just might as well use my phone. My phone's just like a timer.
You walk into Ari's office in his restaurant, and it looks like a library, just like 250 logbooks.
Clocks. Yeah.
He's got one of those ladders, ladders that roll along the wall, so you can grab the logs from the top shelf.
Yeah, just a bunch of timers all over the place too. What is that?
All right, let's talk about closing lists. Olivia, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think this is really important. I think we have my closing list and prep list on the Goodnature website. That a lot of people can download that for free. But this is really important. You should have an open for both front of the house and back of the house, but I'll talk specifically about front of the house. You should have an opening list, a side work list, and a closing list. And then if you have anything special, like a lot of people know that I do BOGO Tuesdays, buy one, get one free Tuesdays, then I have a special prep list for Mondays in preparation for Tuesday, because the pars of prep that we do on that day looks different. So one of the mistakes that I find people are making the most in this industry is they're finding that they can't leave, owners and operators are finding they can't leave their juice bars unattended for an hour because they come back and nothing is done. And when I start to kind of dig into that question of like, why are you strapped to your juice bar? Why do you not have a life? it's always because, I shouldn't say always, but it's 9 out of 10 times, it's because they don't leave specific instructions for their associates. For instance, the associates don't have a closing list, or they don't have side work lists. So when nobody walks in, they're just standing there. So it's really important that you create a to-do list for them at certain parts in the day. But then you have to take it a step further. You can't just write on there, cut strawberries. You have to say how many strawberries you want them to cut. 14 quarts of cut strawberries, 14 quarts of washed blueberries, 2 cases of acai. I pop my acai, and we prep our acai. So 2 cases of popped and stored acai, and it just goes on and on and on. Stack your plastics, fill your paper, check your soap. Like it's like a baby guide for children on like how to operate the store. But there's so much to do. I mean, I can't remember it all. There's so much to do. And I make them check them off. And so that's one of the biggest things is I find that owners and operators are coming in, they're so frustrated the next day because nothing is done. None of the prep is done. So they're starting behind the 8 ball. And it's just really hard to catch up. So just give them specific numbers or pars that they need to have for opening, for closing, and for side work. Like Chef said, it should include, like during COVID, every 2 hours, we had to sanitize everything. But likewise, right now, it should include things like, at what part of the day are they checking the fridge in the morning with the fridge temps, and what about at night? Because if your fridge does go out, at least you know how long it's been out. All right, well, last time we checked it was 4 hours ago and it was okay then, so we should be able to still save this. Or shit, we haven't checked it in 12 days. Who knows how long? We got to throw everything out. So just be really specific on those lists for your associates.
I don't know. Those lists sound an awful lot like logs.
They do. They
do. I gotta
for some
say.
reason, they don't sound as dorky. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the colored tabs, but they do sound a lot like it.
And for like back of the house, it's really same thing. The prep list, what you need done for the next day. Yeah. If for like juicing operations, that starts earlier too. If you're juicing the next day, go ahead and get those pars that you just created, produce order, as well as that produce weighed out, washed, ready to go for the next day, which is extremely important, a huge time saver, getting everything ready to go. So you go in that next day and start juicing right away.
Let's put it this way. If you don't have somebody walking around with a clipboard for at least 3 hours a day, you're doing something wrong, right?
Yes. If there's time to lean, there's time to clean. One thing we started doing recently, Chef, that I thought has been pretty cool, we label our bottles. So because now we have a pretty strict prep list or production list of what days we're doing which juices, we now have a prep list, a filing cabinet that on Mondays we pull out, and it already has a prep list of what back of the house is going to be doing on Monday. So it says on Monday, like milk, citrus, whatever. And it's already on there. So every Monday I just pull it out, and I may add a couple things that it has on there, what foods to produce, what front of the house needs to do or whatever. So on there's another list underneath it that says bottles to label. And so if things get slow and they've finished all their work, they'll start labeling bottles for the juices they're going to produce tomorrow. So that tomorrow when they produce their juice, we're talking about saving 20 minutes on each, they can just pull out all the bottles and start pouring into them. So those are just little things that once you get really organized and you know what you're going to be producing every single day, you can get ahead on prep work. And it can sort of be busy work, but sometimes you need busy work because you're paying for an associate to be there anyway. So you might as well give them work that's going to help you get ahead the next day.
Yeah, there's always those little things that you can be doing.
Yeah.
To like in between time, like you can't juice because you can't start juicing and walk away and start dealing with customers.
Right.
The labeling the bottles is perfect. You just put it back down.
You can do
the
that at the
customer comes
register.
in, take it back out.
Yeah.
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 Cool. I think we covered a lot here. You should have plenty of pars and plenty of logs and plenty of lists and no, but basically it just comes down to organization so you can run your business efficiently without being stressed out all the time because you're constantly over ordering or running out of things, and the place just feels a lot cleaner and more organized when you're really spending the time to do it, right?
It lets you empower the employees, really. I mean, it gives them the ability to handle situations if you're not there, and so you don't have to micromanage, and tell them, oh, you got to do this amount and this amount, this amount. The employee knows now.
Right.
Well, and it's also and it's also helpful when they're not doing it to if you have a reoccurring problem, you kind of have to. The proof is in the pudding, right? Like it says right here, 20 quarts. If I come back and there's not 20 quarts, what were you doing, right? Like this is proof of, if you need to write a disciplinary action report or a documented coaching session or something like that. Like if you're finding that your staff isn't working when you're away, this is a great way to really kind of prove that they're not. Is okay, well, here's a list of things specifically that are supposed to be done and now they're not done, so let's talk about why they're not done. That's the mom in me.
Setting really, really clear expectations, right?
Yeah.
And then, because you can't really hold people accountable until you give them really clear expectations.
That's right.
Otherwise, you just get in this weird thing like, he should know to do this and he didn't do it. It's like, well, why should they know to do that? Well, because it's obvious. Well, it might not be,
Right.
It's common sense. You should have 30 sweet greens.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. See you next week. And thanks for listening, everybody. Peace out.
See you guys. Ciao.
Bye, guys.
It's another Friday. This week I did it my way. I made lots of juice and now I feel a boost. Baby say, oh, it's the way I make my juice. Pressing fruits and roots. This week I did it my way. Baby say, oh, now let's have some fun. There is nothing greater than Fridays at Goodnature.